Hi, good afternoon, everyone. Welcome once again to another Loeries Creative Hour feature. Today, our guest is Miss Anne Githuku-Shongwe from UN Women. Anne is on the line with us. She will be starting a video soon. Hi, Anne, welcome.
Thank you, Preetesh.
Hi, Anne. I'm not sure if your mic is on mute. I can't hear you at the moment.
Can you hear me now? Yeah.
Let's just...
You can't hear me? It's not on mute. It's on.
Apologies, everyone. Anne, I cannot hear you. I've just got a notice from everyone that they can't hear you at the moment. I'm not too sure if maybe
Susie says she can hear me.
Replug your headphones, try and see if we can actually get a connection.
Oh, I just saw a message that said she could hear me. All right.
We should be able to do it. While we're just sorting out the audio challenges on Anne's side as well, and we should be there in a bit. Let's give you a bit of background. So thank you once again to everyone for joining us for Loeries Creative Hour. Such an exciting episode today. Really looking forward to chatting to Anne and finding out more about the great work that she's doing. Something that I think is useful for everyone to know is we just closed the Loeries entries this week. And it's what an interesting year, because we more than doubled entries. We made entries free to support the industry, and the result of that was more than double the amount of entries we received from last year. So it's a year where we're going to get some great stories, some great examples of how society has coped with the challenges of COVID-19, and we're looking forward to sharing that with you over time as we go through the processes as well. And I think one of the key things that we want to highlight is we've got ongoing work, and there's a lot that we're still doing. And I'm not sure if we can just double check and see if your audio is back.
I think you're the only one not hearing me, Preetesh. Everybody else seems to be hearing me. Can you hear me now?
No, we can't. I'm not sure if you can you hear me? If I can get a thumbs up.
Very well. Very well. And
Perfect.
others are saying in the chat that they can hear me.
I can't hear you on this side. I am
not
sure what's happening. You're not muted. And
somebody say something.
Try maybe logging back off and then logging back on, and then we can see if we can get your audio back, because you're definitely not on mute. It's one of the challenges of the world we live in right now, is the technology doesn't always play its part, and it's always one of those interesting ones of trying to figure out how to make the technology work.
Can you hear me now?
And I'm not sure if you unplug your headphones. Would that help?
I did already.
They're unplugged.
And others, just look at the chat, Preetesh.
Unplugged again.
Preetesh, they can hear me, so I think it's you.
So Anne is there. What we can do is, let's see, others hear me. Can we try again?
Hi.
Hi, Anne.
Can you hear me now?
Oh, the rookie error. Rookie error. I started on my side. Yeah, can I tell you a funny story? Let me tell you a funny story. So my nice team at the Loeries got me a nice new laptop. And it's got all of these fancy buttons, and then it's all muted on this side. How funny is?
Because I could see the messages that people are saying they can hear me, so I'm thinking, all right, now how do I tell him that he can't hear me? So
wow, that is fun. See, there we go, rookie error in trying to sort this out. But luckily, I can hear you again. Thank you so much, Anne. What a pleasure to have you here. And I think if anyone does not know too much, I'm gonna give everyone a little bit of background as well on Anne. So Miss Anne Githuku-Shongwe is the UN Women's South Africa multi-country office representative, a role that she's held since 2016. The UN Women's South Africa multi-country office champions women's empowerment and gender equality in Botswana, Lesotho, Swaziland, Namibia, and South Africa, where the office is based. Anne is the founder and chief executive officer of Afro's transformational multimedia and consulting, and is also a strong supporter of transformation through partnerships between Africa's citizens and global partners. She has a proven track record in providing innovative strategy and policy solutions to countries, including high-level advisory services to governments and their cabinets. Prior to establishing Afros, Anne has worked as an international development professional with over 20 years of social and economic development experience working with the United Nations and management consulting firms across Africa, Asia, and the United States. And what a pleasure to have you with us today. Thank you so much for giving up your time to join us and share more about the great work that you're involved in.
Thank you, Preetesh. Really, really excited about this conversation.
Fantastic.
And you can hear me now, right?
I can. Never try out. Okay, number one lesson, never try out a new laptop when you're doing this for the first time. Stick to the old trusted one. I'll learn that next time. But also interesting, I think, just for everyone who's joining us, we have an amazing audience on Zoom, but over and above that, we're coming to you live on Facebook Live, one of our partners, Facebook, as well. So broadcasting not just to everyone in the region in Africa and the Middle East, but everyone across the thousands of people on our Facebook platform who are also tuning into this. So welcome to everyone if you're on Facebook as well, and welcome to everyone who's joining us on the call. If you are on this call, that means you have the ability to share some of the questions that you have. So please feel free to use the Q&A function, the chat functions, share some of the questions. I also want to give a little bit of a read up on UN Women for those who are new and who aren't aware of this. But UN Women is a United Nations entity dedicated to gender equality and the empowerment of women. A global champion for women and girls, UN Women was established to accelerate progress on meeting their needs worldwide. UN Women supports UN member states as they set global standards for achieving gender equality and works with governments and civil society to design laws, policies, programs, and services needed to ensure that the standards are effectively implemented and truly benefit women and girls worldwide. It works globally to make the vision of the Sustainable Development Goals a reality for women and girls and stands behind women's equal participation in all aspects of life, focusing on 4 strategic priorities. Number 1, women lead, participate in, and benefit equally from governance systems. Number 2, women have income security, decent work, and economic autonomy. Number 3, all women and girls live a life free from all forms of violence. And number 4, women and girls contribute to and have greater influence in building sustainable peace and resilience and benefit equally from the prevention of natural disasters and conflicts and humanitarian action. That's some pretty lofty goals. Thank you for joining us. And how are you coping, Anne? I mean, we met once during the launch of the Unstereotype Alliance, and then we've met on Zoom, I think once, twice as well. But how are you coping during this time? How are you personally dealing with the challenges of COVID-19?
Well, thanks, Preetesh. And I suppose I'm privileged to be able to be locked down in a home that, is a beautiful home. I've got a garden and I'm with my family. And I think that's the most important thing right now. All of us are healthy and we're well. And, it's initially, it was kind of exciting and interesting, work from home for a little while, then it started to wear off. But now the reality is setting in, and I think we know that this is just a new way. And so I'm doing fine. We've established new routines and, take walks whenever we can just to breathe. But we're working, and I'm finding in some ways that we're working more intensely than we're working before, because before, you'd at least take a break driving from one place to one meeting to the next. Now it's really just back to back. But I also feel that we have the opportunity to spend much more energy on doing higher value work. What I mean is that because we're not spending a lot of our money on, paying for hotels and for flights and trips and so on, we can redirect ourselves to doing some real deep thinking and bringing in strong technical teams and so on. So it's, in some ways, there's always pros and cons in every situation, but I'm doing well. And as I said, I'm privileged to be able to do this, and I can come speak to you and not have to be in Johannesburg, like sitting in Pretoria where I live.
Okay, but also, I guess one of the challenges as well, in terms of the work that you do, I mean, and I'm thinking back to when we met and we had that brief chat at the launch of the Unstereotype Alliance as well, is that a lot of this work does need to happen face to face. And how is this impacting the ability to actually execute some of the goals that you have?
Well, I mean, I think it's what we're used to. So very often, a lot of the work that we do is supporting the capacity of women in different spheres to be able to actually deliver on economic goals and livelihoods. And so some of the programs that we're engaged with, for instance, are supporting women in the informal sector, women who run spaza shops, women who run small vegetable gardens that supply food to, you know, a small community, women who are businesses that procure from government and the private sector, that all of you should be buying from. And in fact, we're coming for you. Make sure that 30 to 40% of all that you buy, whether services or goods, must come from women. That's one of our big presidential programs. And so, you know, we're designing new ways of doing this, and so we're working using the online platforms. We're taking a lot of our training online. We're trying to train women how to just, you know, use their phones and data on their phones to be able to do e-commerce and find new ways of doing this work. And so a lot of the work that we're doing is connecting them to opportunities. So, for instance, investing in women, in mentors, helping business women to connect to the relief opportunities. We were very fortunate to be able to successfully help a few women farmers to be able to get substantial resources to build up their businesses during this time because they're so necessary. And so, you know, our sort of motto right now in the United Nations is we have to build back better, because even though we were working face to face, in truth, the depth of inequalities and gender inequality in particular, the levels of gender-based violence that we have in this country and all over the world were pervasive before, they're pervasive now. And so we have to all be innovative in how we think about it. And this is where we are. We are in a new normal. And so we're trying to figure out how to make that work. So we run all kinds of workshops online, and Zoom is allowing us to do all kinds of fancy things. So we're keeping on going, and we're doing our best to connect women as best as we can.
Great. And I think there's a lot of people who may not know the specific mandate of UN Women. I know I've read and shared more, but it's always good to hear from somebody who's living and breathing this on a day-to-day basis. How would you explain to somebody who's for the first time being exposed to UN Women, what does UN Women do, and how is UN Women part of the greater goals of the United Nations?
So the United Nations has, you know, they're the holder. First of all, the United Nations is a member state multilateral platform. And so when you think about the United Nations, I know people think about the United Nations as an office in a building in New York, or some, you know, some big guy speaking on TV. But the United Nations is actually comprised of member states. So South Africa is a member of the United Nations. And the United Nations has got global conventions that member states have agreed to abide by to ensure that we are upholding the human rights of every citizen everywhere in many and multiple spheres. So our responsibility, and by the way, this is our 10th birthday of United Nations Women. We are the newest United Nations agency because, you know, it just really explains that the issue of gender equality has never been an important issue for many political leaders for decades and centuries, actually. And so we were formed from a big push from women's movements and feminist movements who said enough is enough. We cannot have the United Nations, you know, people have heard of UNICEF, who work on children, and the World Food Program, who deal with food and nutrition, and United Nations High Commissioner for Refugees, who focus on migrants and refugees, and you know, many different United Nations bodies, and the World Health Organization. Right now, everybody knows about WHO. That's a sister agency. So what WHO is doing for the world, which is really trying its best to uphold global standards for health and try to provide global guidelines for, you know, country by country, what it is that we need to do. That's what we are doing for gender equality and women's empowerment. The story behind the work that we do is that if countries, businesses continue as they are today, it will take us 217 years before we experience gender equality. So you, your grandmother, you, your grandchildren, your great-grandchildren will not see a time when a woman can apply for a job anywhere, or a woman can apply for finance and expect to get equal access as you would, Preetesh.
Wow.
So in truth, what we have to do is push on every single front to make sure that the world knows that if we are going to live a life of equality, where every one of our children, male or female or gender non-conforming, has access to every opportunity that there is, that they can go for it. But right now, the world is pitted against us. And so women are having to push triple, multiple times to be able to get their voices heard. And so this is what we do across the world.
Yeah, and one of the things you said as well is that, you know, global leaders, and being one of the newest agencies, I think a large responsibility that was that a lot of global leaders were not shining a spotlight or focusing on women's rights. And as you said, is this largely a factor of men largely being in power? And is that one of the reasons why it was never really a spotlight for so many years?
Yeah, I mean, I think the truth of it is that our world system and many of our countries are run by men, and they're run within the patriarchal system. Patriarchy is a system. It's a system that elevates men above women. It's a system that, sadly, even for women, we have all bought into the belief that this is the pecking order of the way society is organized. And so, you know, these systems are sustained because of the cultural practices that we have from all our different communities, from churches sustain this, you know, pop culture sustain this. So anybody who contributes to shaping culture and behaviors reinforce the belief that women are inferior to men, and that men are actually born to lead, and we are born to be secondary citizens to them. Of course, we have the privilege of a country like South Africa that is one of the newer countries in the world, and has a constitution that recognizes the equal rights of women. But you know, that doesn't necessarily translate into behavior. So, for instance, we have a land policy that allows any woman to have access, equal access to land as a man would. But customary law and customary practice is that, you know, a woman in some context, and it's not in every context, it differs from one community to another, you know, you have to go through a chief. And I know my husband is from Eswatini, and in Eswatini, I did work there on gender, and it was very interesting to learn that the minute I got married, I actually, according to the law, became a legal minor. And that before I got married, I could have owned property. As soon as I got married, I lost that right. That has since changed because there's new laws in Eswatini that have changed, but this was, you know, 25 years ago, where this was the policy. And so this is what happens, is that in many ways you go to a bank now, and I know many women, we still go to banks in South Africa, and you apply for a loan. And it, you know, it actually asks you, if you're married, your husband has to be part of that signature. So this is what patriarchy does, because my husband may not be earning an income, but because the assumption is that he's the owner of the resources in the household, therefore he has to play a role here. And this translates in how we run our businesses, how we run our ads. Speaking of the Loeries and the creative community, is that we just continue to reinforce what we believe is the way of life and the way that life should be. But this translates into the levels of poverty that we have. Poverty is feminized. Anywhere in the world you go, you talk about unemployment, and people talk about unemployment as if it's one lovely blanket of everybody who's unemployed. But when you look at the unemployment statistics and you disaggregate them, you will find that women everywhere in the world are much, much more impacted by unemployment. They're impacted by the lack of financial access. They're impacted by the lack of technology access. You know, it's a painful place to work in the sense that every time we start out to describe ourselves and describe our work, we're forced to describe the place of disadvantage where we sit. But what we are doing at UN Women is saying, actually, take a look at this. During this COVID times, you've been seeing, I'm sure, Preetesh, that WhatsApp image that has been going around about the countries that are led by men versus the countries that are led by women and how they're performing, right? So, and that story grows in almost everything. That story grows in that companies that have more women on boards have stronger bottom line. That if you have 30% women on your board, you should expect to have anywhere between 20 to 30% increase in your revenues. Just because you have women in there who start changing some of the practices and culture within your business. So we can walk through this almost anywhere, and women enrich all kinds of contexts. I'm not talking yet about the advertising because I know you're going to ask me about it, and I'm going to come to it specifically. But yeah.
Yeah, but and so much what he says resonates with me. So I've said this in the past, and I've said this on national radio in South Africa, and I'm going to say it again. This platform, no one's heard it, and I think one of the things that I recognize is that even my role as Loeries CEO, I just started in April. But I go like, what you've got to do is, even if you're taking a leadership in a role in an organization, even when you start, you've got to think about the succession plan. Yeah. And my succession plan is already like, even though I've just started, I know when I leave, I want to make sure that I leave and a woman takes over from me as CEO of the Loeries. It has to be that, and there's no other way. And if it's a conscious decision that you make it that, and I want to say it because everyone's on this can hold me to task to that if I'm not able to achieve that, because there's financial goals, there's goals in terms of creativity, but it should also be goals in terms of succession and making a difference into the industry.
Absolutely.
So everyone on this, you can hold me to task for that, because that's something that I'm working on. We'll make sure that happens as well. But
just on that point, and it's a really, really good of you to start preparing as soon as you've arrived, just as you've arrived. But I think what is most important about this is that people then bring the argument that, but shouldn't we be about merit? Shouldn't we be about the skills? Shouldn't we be hiring for the best, let the best man win? And it's ironic that the language is let the best man get the job. Well, the truth is, there's a brilliant video that has been going around on social media for a while. It's a few years now. I love that video. And it's that video of a coach with a sort of mix of black and white kids at a school in the US. And he says to them, the person who gets to the finishing line will get some kind of reward. And but he says, before I tell you to go and run this 100 meters, I'm going to ask you a bunch of questions. And, if this applies to you, move forward. So he says, and he raises questions about if you, live in a house with two parents, take a step forward. If you have always had 3 meals on the table, take a step forward. And he goes on showing the privilege of race in this context. It's race and income. And he shows how by the time he has finished putting the criteria down on the table about the foundation before the race begins, already majority of the white kids are almost at the finishing line already. And so many of the black kids are sitting at the back, standing at the back, ready to run a race 100 meters and will never, ever, ever catch up. And so the truth of it is that it is crucial, and that's why we talk about gender equality and women's empowerment, is that we have got to recognize that women will not become the top CMOs because they just have never had the opportunity to enter that race at the same time and level as the many men who've been there for many, many, many years. And it happens always across the world. But look at what happens when you give a woman an opportunity like that, and you give her the support to shine in that work. She excels because she knows that she's given an opportunity to get with a leg up, and that she's going to have to put everything behind that position. And so I congratulate you for that. And it takes a lot of support around it for her to be able to succeed. And just take the risk, and you'll see fantastic results in the end. So
I think as you're speaking, I was thinking of a personal example before I get into just, I always go like these sessions are an informal chat. It's you and I having a chat and everyone else getting a chance to
listen in.
sneak in and listen in. But, you know, from one of the things that's always stuck with me, my mom passed away probably about 14 years, but the lesson she's taught me is always stuck. And she always just, as a kid, I remember her always telling me that, and she'd show me her report. She'd have like amazing marks and stuff like that. But because she was a girl, she was not allowed to go into high school. So as soon as primary school finished, and my mom only did up till, what was that, standard 5 or something? And then they had to stop. Why? Because as a girl, you cannot go. And she went to a Catholic school, and she says the nuns came home and they spoke to her father and said, please, this child has an opportunity. She can do something in her life. And the only reason she wasn't allowed to go on and be in high school and have that education is because she was a girl, and for no other reason other than that. And it's painful having those stories that you hear from people you love. And I think sometimes sorry.
I'm going to build on that story, and I think
Please,
it's such a powerful story. My mother-in-law is now 86, just turned 86. And she went to university.
Mm-hmm.
And I look back and I think, my goodness, what would it have taken at that time? And she's also from KZN. Mm-hmm. What would it have taken in that time to have a woman go to university and finish? And her story was that her father gave her the green lights and supported her to go to university. Mm-hmm. And Preetesh, to me, this is the most important story. Men who have the power to make those decisions and choices, to change the trajectory and change the destiny of a company, change the destiny of a household, change the destiny of a nation, have the power in their hands to change that decision. Just like my grandfather-in-law, or my father-in-law, no, that's not my father-in-law, yeah, father-in-law would have, no, that's my father, that's my grandfather-in-law. This is my mother-in-law's father did, right? Mm-hmm. What your grandfather didn't do, and that's because of whatever his context was. But imagine if he had, your mother's story would have been completely different. You see, so the story of equity is one that is so crucial, and we cannot see change unless we see men in particular, and I place this completely, every man who's listening here, wherever you are leading, and you're leading somewhere, whether it's at your household level, or a community project you're working on, or a company where you are, you have the power to change the trajectory of that company in terms of gender equality and gender equity by the decisions that you make right now. Just like you're saying, Preetesh. Mm-hmm. And we launched the He for She initiative as UN Women. And if you look online, and people can go to heforshe.org, we had studied this issue of gender equality and women's empowerment. And women have worked for years. They have raised flags. They have gone onto the street with placards. They continue to do that, to say, we deserve the right. We deserve equal share. We deserve, And what happens is that we continue waiting for 217 years for equality. But you take a country like Rwanda, and all of a sudden, the head of state takes a decision. I want an equal cabinet, and I want an equal parliament. And in no time, equality becomes a norm, right? We, in our He for She program, have got heads of state who are doing that work, but we also have companies who have signed on as impact champions. So De Beers in South Africa, Standard Bank have signed on at the CEO level to create change throughout their company. ABSA has signed up. So there are many companies that are in universities that are signing up. And so as they do that, it is their responsibility to create this change and opportunity for women in their companies. PwC is a global impact champion of He for She. Mm-hmm. Within 2 years of being a He for She champion, they moved their women in management from, I think it was 18% to 42%. So where have those women been? The women were always there, but they were not given the leg up. They were not given the opportunity. In fact, were they even seen? And so this is what makes the difference. It's just the boldness to start creating that change. So I really appreciate your story about your mom, and you know.
Yeah, just a little bit
Yeah.
of personal. One of the things I do notice, though, so over the years, I've been lucky enough to be invited to a lot of initiatives that are designed to finding ways to give women more opportunities in workplace or in different environments in society, whatever. And there's a lot of corporates who get involved in this as well. But for some strange reason, I always find that when the corporate sends a representative, it's always a woman to this, and not enough men are sent into this. Why do you think so? And why is it important for men to be involved in these discussions as well when they happen?
Absolutely. So this year is 25 years since the Beijing Beijing Conference for Women. It was the fourth World Conference for Women. It was a massive conference of over 40,000 women were there, and they pulled together what was then called the Beijing Platform for Action, which became the blueprint for how it is we're going to actually start creating gender equality in our lifetime. And so it looks at gender equality. So that's where the conversations like equal pay began to emerge, and conversations about women's unpaid work, and you know, and all the, you know, having men and women in leadership and so on. So when we did a review this year, every country in the world did a review of their gender equality progress, you know, and we did an assessment of what has made the difference or what has not made the difference. And what we found was that the main thing was social norms and stereotypes. It is our beliefs and our attitudes that are so deeply entrenched. It's our unconscious biases that shape, therefore, how we make those decisions. So when a company sees, you know, a conversation about gender equality, they then automatically think this is so women can go in there and get a little bit more empowered or feel good about it. And it's not internalized that it is their responsibility as the leader of the organization to make that change, or as a man who in some way or another is interacting with women and therefore has a responsibility to be a better gender equality citizen. And so there is, and this is what I was talking about, that patriarchy is a system. We are all part of it, you know. You, Preetesh, and I, if we sit down and examine our own unconscious biases, we all have them. Every single one of us have them. I always tell the story about how I brought up a son and two daughters, and you know, and with a husband who's very gender neutral in his perspective, and very pro gender equality in the way in which he holds my hand as we walk through with his family. But what is so interesting is that I've shared many times that my son will be washing the dishes, and it's his turn, but I still have this kind of like, let me help him, you know? Yeah. But when my daughters are doing it, they're good, you know? So even after all these years of doing this work, there's still a bias that I hold. And I have to continuously sort of work on ensuring that I am, I'm dealing with that. I'm much better now, but I'm just saying it's important that you examine it at a very, very personal level, because unless you do, you will not make the changes that we need to hear for the long term, and to be able to have a world that is more equal, a world that actually makes more business sense, that actually produces better revenues, that, you know, that will have a stronger economy because women are equal. We know that if women have equal access than men do to all economic opportunities, the world economy would grow significantly. So it's not just a cute thing to do. It is something that you need to do because it transforms the way society is, and transforms businesses. So men who are listening today, in everything that you do, just check your bias. It's the same way that we've had to confront Black Lives Matter, you know, Me Too matter. You've got to be able to confront what you really, really deeply believe about women's role versus your role, and women's position versus your position. And that translates into the way that we advertise, and the way that we position our companies and our brands. So it's crucial that men are involved. And the next time that you get an invitation to a gender equality stuff, any man who's listening, you go yourself. And be okay with being uncomfortable. Because the next time you do it, the second time and the third time, each time you'll be less uncomfortable because you're beginning to understand and you're introspecting. So just take a leap, you'll be good.
I agree. I think a lot of men that I speak to think it's just going to be a platform for men to be attacked. And I think that the reality is that it comes to other men to go, it's not a platform for you to be attacked, but it's holding up a mirror to some of the harsh realities of society and understanding how you can be part of the solution to the challenges that are happening. Speaking about unconscious, and I want to get into the advertising, but unconscious bias, because you bring this up and it's such a fascinating topic. Because it's not just in our households, but it's in our organizations that we live in.
Absolutely.
What is the recommendation that you'd give, advice you can give to, if you're somebody in an organization and you feel that you're experiencing this unconscious bias from might be leadership or being a leader within an organization? How do you negate this within a corporate structure? And what are some of the things that you can actually do to ensure that organizations leave out the natural gender bias that or unconscious biases that come in because of the individual human beings within the organization?
Well, this is a very good question for me, and it's an opportunity to pitch a program that we have. We have an initiative called the Women Empowerment Principles that is part of the UN Global Compact that many companies are signatories to and have been signatories to for decades. And so the issue of unconscious bias is about your mindset. It's about your beliefs. It's about your attitudes, right? But at an organizational level, this is institutionalized. And so it's crucial that we work at disrupting this at multiple levels because the biases happen at multiple levels. So for example, with this Women Empowerment Principles, the first principle is about leadership and ensuring that we are pushing for gender equal leadership within every single company. So we want to have women on boards, we want to have women in leadership, we want to have women in non-traditional roles in their leadership. So it's not, just don't put women in HR and in the 2 or 3 kind of areas that they generally sit in, but be able to actually promote women all over the organization. So the leadership is one thing because it begins to change the culture of an organization just by having women in leadership. The second one is looking at issues of discrimination in the workplace and discrimination at all fronts. So race discrimination, sex discrimination, and this is where a lot of the bias work takes place. There is a global policy that ILO convention that ILO has just released, the other UN agency, our sister agency ILO, on violence and harassment in the workplace. And the policy talks about how to embed a policy against violence and harassment in the workplace by creating both formal and informal mechanisms for reporting, for counseling and support. Biases are deeply entrenched and they come from, like I said, your religious beliefs. They come from your cultural beliefs, the way in which you were brought up, the sort of community reward system and incentives to behave in a particular way versus another, what you listen to, And so if the company takes a decision to be a signatory to the Women Empowerment Principles, then what we work with you to do is to make sure that you're walking through these issues of discrimination in your company, that you're starting to actually run dialogues across the organization where people can have the opportunity, either in groups or at an individual level, to confront their own unconscious bias. Because this is deep. I mean, it's like race issues. Preetesh, you've come from a history of apartheid in this country where, and 25 years later, a lot of those race issues are still deeply entrenched. But there's some who've overcome. And the famous story, speaking of Mandela, and Zinzi, God rest her soul in peace. But if you're speaking of Mandela Day, just yesterday, Mandela forgave his warden, who was an abuser and a perpetrator of violence against him and mistreating him, and many others who around him exhibited racism, and they came around and began to open themselves out to a relationship. So it's the same way in terms of unconscious bias in gender equality. And for men to open themselves out to the fact that, number one, I am biased against women. I do believe that women have a particular position in my household. I am a patriarchal man, and these are my beliefs. Are they serving me? Sure. In many instances, that really serves you, because women have also been brought into believing that, you know, when the husband walks into the house, he should take off his shoes, lie on the couch, and she will then come and, you know, wash his feet and give him his tea or whatever it might be. This is how I grew up. And it's a great advantage for men. But it's enough already for many women, because it has put us in a position where we can't, our own livelihood is impacted on. The kind of silence and abuse that we deal with on a day-to-day basis is intolerable. The mental health impact on women, and every one of the men who's listening has a wife or a daughter or somebody around them who has suffered these consequences in one way or another, whether physically or deeply, mentally and emotionally. And so it is in your interest to start looking at how to shape this organization differently. Otherwise, the organization might actually have to take consequences against you because of your refusal to recognize the equal rights of another member of your team. So there are ways to do this using this platform of the women empowerment principles. And there's other principles that look at who you buy from. I mentioned who you buy from. Principle 5 is about the supply chain. And it's totally unfair that across the world, the global average is only 1% of procurement goes to women's hands, goes into women, to women buyers. So the Loeries and every company that is represented here, who do you buy from? Who are your suppliers? Have you ever thought about whether it matters? Yeah. Yes. Have you ever thought about, does it matter to you who you buy from? But listen to this. One company that has done business with a big steel company, you know, it's the same business that has done business with that company for 25 years. They play golf with them. It's an old boys club. They've made lots and lots of money. They've got lovely beach houses in Neisner and all kinds of stuff. But it's just 5, the member of my immediate family that benefit from that. We have research that shows that when one woman business thrives, 10 people, at least 10 people in a household benefit. So more women benefit. And this is why the economies grow when women are at the helm of economic opportunity. So if you could literally just start splitting out all the goods and services that you buy and start buying from women and consciously buying from women, you are transforming the community that you come from, that we serve, this country. You are actually creating a revolution in every single decision that you make, whether it's buying pens and paper in your offices, or the tables and chairs that you buy, or the advertising that you buy. Buy from women. It transforms lives in this country. And it's you know, so the women empowerment principles looks at your biases everywhere. You know, how do you train? Do you train women in some of the softer, sort of less relevant skills, and then men go for these real high-level, sophisticated, technical kind of training, you know? So even there are biases. So the biases permeate all of these 7 principles. And so this is what we use as a tool. We do a baseline analysis of your company, and then we use the tools to help you start thinking about how to grow. But it is you first. It starts with you. So each person has to ask themselves, what is my bias? And am I okay with that? And start challenging that.
And in terms of these biases, and I think this is a good time to bring in advertising, because advertising plays a large role in solidifying and creating these biases in society. So tell me more about the work that you and Women's doing in this area.
So You and Women took the decision that, you know, we have traditional partners. Our traditional partners are government. We work with civil society. We might work with faith-based organizations, but these are sort of the communities that we normally work with. We have never really in the past had conversations with the world of media and advertising and the creatives, right? And yet my decision about what phone to buy is shaped by you. My decision about, you know, how to, you know, I don't know, how to bring up my children, how the decisions around, you know, what I wear today. Should I wear this Duke? Should I not wear it? Should I buy this ring? Should I wear these, you know, what cup? I've got a lovely cup here. Should I buy this cup or should I buy another cup?
Yeah.
You know, you guys shape that. And you shape that, and the biases that you hold come through in these ads. And they then reinforce that patriarchal world that continues to discriminate against women and hold them back from real opportunity that we should have. So if you look at all there's lots of research. And so we launched as UN Women in partnership with Khan and a few key companies, the Stereotype Alliance, and you can just Google it, the Stereotype Alliance. And we formed it because we felt that we needed to challenge a lot of the biases. It's a thought and action platform that we're really working to try to disrupt these gender-based harmful stereotypes that reinforce practices. Let's look at this issue of gender-based violence in this country, Preetesh. You know that in some of the research we've been doing, that we have learned that in so many ways, men are rewarded for their machismo selves. By, you know, the way that ads are put on the table, the way that they're, you know, a strong man at the household. And you may not necessarily put violence on the table, but you're building out a kind of a man who is strong and dominant and, you know, can do anything because of who he is. And so we have to disrupt this completely and eradicate these stereotypes. And so the world of advertising is a very powerful one, and is one that continues to have biases in very strong ways. And so in the so through the Stereotype Alliance, we've been doing studies, and many of our partners, the Gina Davis Institute does a study of Khan Leon's ads. And in those ads always shows how male characters are depicted as, you know, positive and working and strong and, you know, visionary and in great positions all the time. And women are holding positions that depict them as, you know, she's the one sitting at home with the child doing the ironing. And we have a video as part of this Stereotype Alliance, which I love, which is The Problem Is Not Seeing the Problem. And in that ad, it talks about how it depicts how so many women who want to act or want to be in this world of creatives get stuck in very stereotypical roles, whereas they're actually powerful women who could be standing and showing and portraying themselves in the future vision that we want to see of a gender equal world. But instead we are continuously reinforcing this biases that just, you know, continue to reinforce and produce very dangerous actual, we actually produce very dangerous stereotypes. And so what we've been doing with the Stereotype Alliance is working with the whole world of media and creatives to start challenging stereotypes. And from Google and Unilever and Nando's and all kinds of you know, other partners, we are working with our partners and hand in hand with you, Loeries, to start really inviting the creative community to rethink this and challenge yourselves. Take a second look. Every time you put an ad on the table, every time you create a video, ask yourself, how does this portray women versus men? How does it portray an LGBTQI person? Is this the future that we want to see? Is this the way in which we want to portray this? And so we have multiple partners who are joining the Stereotype Alliance, but it's an opportunity and an invitation to the creative world. Right now, we're working on a GBV program with you. And what that is about is that, you know, from our world as UN Women and government, you know, we ran these ads and, you know, say enough is enough, or, you know, don't kill. And, you know, I don't know that it moves men in any way, but you guys move people to make decisions. And so we are partnering with you, and we've got an advertising strategist working with us and really trying to draw in the creatives to help us to rethink how do we get to the bottom of this, so that that man who's thinking that he has to kill this woman so that she doesn't tell the story about being pregnant out of wedlock, that story, what would stop that man in his tracks? What would stop that other man who thinks that it's okay to rape a child? You know, how could you really use the power of this media to actually change the future to the one that we really want to see? And so that's what the Stereotype Alliance is about.
And in terms of companies that are coming on board, do you find that it's just at a high level where they're discussing it, or is it actually getting deep down towards all the levels of the organization? And how is it that we can work? If it's not, how do we make sure that this messaging goes deep down to every level of the organization?
You know, like I said about our He for She Impact program, a lot of this depends on the leadership, right? And so for us, we make sure that the signing and the sort of invitation to join the campaign comes from the top of the organization. And then really start trying to bring senior leaders within the organization. And in this instance, CMOs are crucial, because CMOs make big time decisions. And I really feel that we need to have an important conversation with CMOs. And so what we are seeing some movement in some of the companies, but those are the companies that are really driving from the front and are trying to push to make sure that there's change within their organization. Khan itself is now using our partnership to look at unstereotyped, unstereotyped criteria for the ads. The Loeries, I hope, is doing the same, that as the ads, so for everybody who has submitted their piece for the Loeries this year, that we are going to assess them on the basis of their ability to unstereotype and how much they are unstereotyping. And so this kind of change, because of the unconscious bias issues, is slow. But all we need is just one person to move within an organization and start trying to drive that change. And we begin to see real action happening within some of these companies. And so we've got companies who are taking the responsibility, and there's lots of them who, are running. And I think I had pulled some up. I was trying to look through. Vodafone has been running a campaign to change the face. We've got many. Diageo and Google doing studies that are really looking at insights on stereotyping and advertising. Alibaba, Unilever, and so we're beginning to see those companies making it, like with Unilever. They are. I would say that close to. I don't want to guess a percentage, but my sense is that majority of their ads now are paying very close attention to this. And when they don't, they're called out, like they did not so long ago. Nike is really trying to show a different face. And in every ad that we see, they are really pushing forward against these biases. So it is possible to do. And we are seeing companies that are doing this very deliberately. And so the more that can come on board, the better it is.
And then obviously, because the advertising industry has so many multiple layers, you've got the CMOs and agency heads who are involved with some of the most strategic stuff in terms of the ad. But you also have people who might be, let's say, as a freelancer, or might be in production, who might now come across an ad, and they might be at a point where they're looking at this and going, I recognize that this ad that I'm going to be working on has some inherent stereotypes built in it. And especially at that point, a lot of people are obviously scared to speak up. What would be your advice in terms of making sure that you can create an impact and create effective communication that breaks stereotypes, and within a context of where you may be fearful of speaking up about this?
Well, I mean, I think in our partnership with you, Preetesh, we obviously have to have monitoring tools that we use to enable every ad to have to go through an assessment So we have to have a way to be checking within the company what biases look like, and we have tools that we've developed for doing that. But the other thing that we are talking about doing together with you is to really pull together the kind of training that needs to happen, so that we have masterclasses and training of freelancers and advertising companies and market, everybody who's in this space starts learning what this looks like. And putting tools out there. So if you go into the Stereotype Alliance, you will find, website, you will actually find some tools so that you can already begin to look at that. But I think we just have to keep at it, trying to create the opportunities for everybody to understand what that means. Because again, this is your unconscious bias that you sleep with every single day. So you might not even be recognizing it. But whistleblowing is something that, as I was saying, talking about this sexual harassment in the workplace, that we encourage companies to create the kind of monitoring within your company, both formal and informal, so that people who are uncomfortable about something have a way to raise their hand without fear of retaliation or of losing the opportunity. But we hope that with time, and this is why for us we think starting at the leadership is so important, is that the leadership then can start creating a culture that promotes unstereotyped ads. And the UK passed a policy last year that bans gender stereotyped ads. So it's coming, and it's work that we're going to be doing here in South Africa. So people need to get ready, because you don't want to have a black stamp on your ad that says stereotyped, and therefore we can't go forward with this. You're going to end up losing business. So it makes business sense. Yeah.
We have, can you believe we have run out of time, but this is such a fascinating discussion. I think, I wish I had more time, and I think we're going to have a lot more discussions going forward. And I'm looking forward to finding every way to work together to make sure that we're working together to support women in our industry and supporting women in greater society through the work being done in our industry. And we appreciate everything that you're doing and the advice that you're giving us as well. So thank you so much, Anne. Much appreciated.
Thank you, Preetesh.
And maybe just in terms of parting, we have people from across Africa and the Middle East who tune in, who are going to be watching this in the next few days to come as well. What advice, not just for South Africa and the countries that you oversee as well, but across Africa and the Middle East, what advice would you give to everyone watching who wants to get involved or who wants to find out how they can make a difference in their society?
Well, I think the truth is that the Stereotype Alliance is a global initiative, and just go on our site and really take a look at how you can get involved. And I was really excited at the Loeries last year that there was a beautiful ad from Saudi Arabia, I think, that was looking at I think it was could have been the AA, but it was about when the policy passed for women, legalizing women driving, and they tried, and they so the policy happened, and then they waited for years, and for months, and nothing happened. Women were still not driving, and so they came up with an ad to encourage men to teach the brothers teach their sisters, and husbands teach their wives, and fathers teach their daughters, and be the ones who, in essence, have enabled the woman in their household to be the first out there to actually drive. And it completely shifted the story. So wherever you are, there is an opportunity to unstereotype. There is an opportunity to get involved in really working with the gender equality world. The work of gender-based violence is a big world. The world of women in the economy is a big world. And so in any one of these spaces, we're always looking for creatives to help us to find ways to drive unstereotyped communication, to help us to change the story and really start shaping a new future for women. And for a gender equal world, because we can imagine a gender equal world where every one of us has equal access to that life. So I would encourage everyone who's here to take a look at the End Stereotype Alliance and where the opportunities are. Go to unwomen.org, where you can also find information about the work that we do at unwomen.org. But I would encourage you more to go to your local communities, you know, at a personal level, whether it's through your faith organization or through community-based organizations, and find out what kind of programs exist for women. Some of them are, you know, are just taking care of young children, but in every one of these spaces, the unstereotyped world, the creative world is really deeply, deeply needed. We all need you, and it's you can actually change how people think and feel about a situation just by the way in which you position a piece of work. So you're powerful, powerful. Use that power, but use it for good.
And thank you so much. So Anne Githuku-Shongwe, UN Women, thank you so much for joining us and sharing all those insights. I think and for everyone who's on, just to echo what Anne said, please go to unwomen.org to read about all the amazing work that Anne and her colleagues are actually doing. But if you want to do something, just a simple act today to make a difference, I think on your social media, if you can go and share the unwomen.org website and ask people to read and find out more about the amazing work that's been done, that's a small thing you can do right now. Takes a minute to actually do. But once again, thank you so much, Anne. I'm looking forward to more discussions and working together towards a gender equal world and a gender equal society, and especially within our field of advertising as well. Thank you so much for all your support.
Thank you, Preetesh, and thank you to all the listeners.
Thanks, Anne. All the best. Take care.
Take care. Bye-bye.
Cheers. Bye-bye. And if you'd like to find out more and share this talk, please feel free to look on the Loeries YouTube site. We will be uploading this in a few days, and it's available immediately on Facebook. So Facebook Live, have a look, please share, and ask other people to have a look at this chat. All the best, and looking forward to chat. And just to add, maybe before I leave, something the Loeries has done that I can't share to everyone, but to anyone who's watching this, and you'll find out more. We had our AGM yesterday, and I can't share who it is just yet, but I think one of the things that I can share is that for the first time in a few years, we have voted in a woman chairperson as chairperson of the Loeries. So we'll be sharing. It's good. So
fantastic! Wow.
The little changes that I'm making, and we're going to make it across everywhere we can. So look out for the announcement next week. So next week we'll be sharing more, and we'll be chatting to this phenomenal woman next week, Friday. So please tune in.
Can you believe it? Wonderful. Thank you so much. But for everyone who's listening, just check your bias and see how every little shift you can make, every one of us can change it. Just one small move today, another one tomorrow.
Good advice. Good advice for the weekend. Thank you, Anne, and thanks, everyone. All the best. Take care. Have a good weekend. Take care. Bye-bye.
Thank you, Preetesh. Bye-bye.
Thanks, Anne. Bye-bye.